listening to Loving BDSM Podcast, Episode 6. Today, we're discussing changing dynamics within your DS relationship. Hey everybody, Kayla Lords here, along with OMG Guess Who, John Brownstone.
Hi.
Welcome to the Loving BDSM Podcast. If this is your first time listening, then thanks for coming. Loving BDSM is produced every Friday for your kinky pleasure, and show notes are found at kaylalords.com. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. If you love what you hear, we'd love a good review on iTunes. You can follow me on Twitter at Kayla Lords and visit John Brownstone at southernsirsplace.com. All links are in the show notes. Now let's get into the show. Both John Brownstone, who I'm going to start calling Daddy from here on out, or I might start twitching and foaming at the mouth, and I receive questions from kinksters all the time. Most of the time, it's submissives asking if this thing or that thing in their relationship is okay or normal. But lately, I've been hearing from more and more people, again, typically submissives, who are reading articles I've written or shared from other writers on being in a daddy and little relationship. They thank me for reassuring them it's normal or tell me stories about how they felt like a crazy person and are glad to know the daddy, little, or in my case, baby girl thing is completely normal and has nothing to do with little kids. Daddy, would you say that's the typical reaction you get from people learning about daddies and littles, that they're glad to know it's not a pedophile thing?
Oh, absolutely. It's not about, anything to do with kids. For the most part, a real daddy dom baby girl relationship is not typically about age play. It's not about role playing. It's really about being nurturing. It's about helping the other person pursue their dreams, their ambitions. When they've had a rough day, it's about being there for them. Allowing them to slip into that place where they can feel vulnerable, allowing them to slip into that little space, know that they're protected and that it's all right for them to be able to go into that space.
Okay, y'all. So today, for our first podcast episode together, and OMG, it makes me want to squeeze that we're talking to you together like this. He's stroking my hair now. We thought we'd talk more in depth about making the switch from our own original dynamic when he was Sir and I was Pet to where we're at now, Daddy and Baby Girl. Okay, Daddy, you go first. What did you think of the whole Daddy Dom Little thing at first?
Well, at first, again, I wasn't too sure, as it wasn't something I'd really thought about as a dynamic. My previous relationship that in my DS I was in, we were Sir and Pet at that time. I had been deeply into the gore books.
Yes.
So we had, there were sprinklings of Gorian aspects mingled into the relationship.
I remember learning slave positions.
Yes.
Very early on. Mm-hmm.
Yes. When we first, that's where I got a lot of the slave positions that kneeling positions that I taught you at the time. Mm-hmm. In thinking about back at that time, some of the first thoughts that came to my mind about, being a daddy dom was, role playing. And on the other extreme of that, there were even thoughts of, sugar daddy that had come to mind. So,
were you afraid of anything in particular about the dynamic when you did think of it?
Not so much afraid, but I guess out of ignorance at the time. I guess I thought I was, worried about, being a kinkster already and, kind of coming to terms with the things that I'm into, thinking about that kind of made me wonder if, if you would be thought of as some kind of pedophile or, even, let's face it, even in the kink community, they even have limits too on a lot of things, and
there's a lot of misunderstandings in the kink community about our dynamic.
Yes,
I mean at the same time.
Well, it's something that's still fairly new. I think it's kind of another branch, of DS. And like anything else, it can go from one extreme to the other.
Very true.
But I think back at that time all in all, being a daddy, dom, baby girl, little, was still kind of fairly new, and it was, you were just kind of, to me at least, is this, for real? Is this,
Are you saying it squigged you out?
Yeah.
It squigged you out?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So what about you, baby girl?
Well, I admit the idea of it at first made me very uncomfortable. I still remember the blog post where I said, I might be a submissive, but I definitely wasn't a little. I might be childlike, but I couldn't call anyone daddy. It's on the record, y'all, back to 2002, 12, I think. Hell, my Sir and Baby Girl books came about because I wasn't comfortable with the term daddy for the dominant character, Jonathan. Y'all, I called my own father daddy until he died, and frankly, if he was still alive, I'm not sure what I would have done. I mean, the word was associated with my actual father, and it squigged me out a lot. Now, that being said, I was drawn to the dynamics of a daddy dom, the nurturing, caring, softer, gentler side of dominance. Well, okay, it's only softer and gentler when you're well-behaved. Get a little sassy and all bets are off.
That's right.
I strive to be a good girl, I promise.
You do pretty good.
I think I was most scared, though, of being confused with a pedophile or being more of a freak than I already was as a kinkster. I didn't want to be associated with doing bad things to kids, and children and sex definitely don't turn me on. But then a day came after much reading and soul-searching and thinking when I realized it had nothing to do with children. Being a baby girl to your daddy dom had more to do with how we relate to one another and what I needed from you. Now,
True.
Do you remember when I asked if you were a daddy dom?
Oh, yes. I think I will not forget that.
Branded in your memory.
Yeah. We were still in a long-distance relationship at that time. And
the good old days, right?
Yes. 400 miles between us, and a time zone at that too.
In a time zone, yes.
And I was up visiting you. It was one of my trips up to visit, and you asked me if I thought I could possibly be a daddy dom.
And the reaction was swift.
Oh, yeah. It was just boom, bam. I looked you straight in the eye, and I said no.
And I remember the first time I called you daddy. It took all of my courage, y'all. We're in the middle of having wild monkey sex, and I had this urge to scream out, "More daddy, give me more daddy." Part of my brain said it was the perfect time because if he didn't like it, I could just say it was a moment of dirty talk gone wrong. It still took me a few minutes, though. I mean, there he is, pounding into me with all he's got, and I'm having an internal debate. Typical. So finally, I call out, "Daddy," and holy hell, y'all, everything changed. It was awesome. What did you think when you heard me call you that?
Oh, goodness. I mean,
We're having flashbacks right now, y'all. Just forgive us for a minute.
My, oh, my. I know I was just like, in the moment,
everything became more intense.
Oh, yeah. It was like a switch flipped in my head, and everything just got better. Yeah.
Yes, it did. It did get much, much better.
Yes, it did. I don't know. It felt right at that moment, and I went with it, and oh boy, yeah.
And he hasn't looked back, y'all.
I haven't looked back since. Nope. And what did you think about the first time I called you baby girl?
Oh, Lordy, I preened.
Yes,
he's petting me again, y'all. I remember smiling and blushing and thinking, yes, that's exactly who I am and what I want to be.
There was a little cooing sound.
There was the cooing sound. You're right. I totally make a cooing sound, y'all. But it started earlier than that, if you remember. I mean, even back in the day when I was pet, you'd call me little one, a term I still adore.
That's true.
Part of being submissive, I think, is feeling smaller than you, being protected by you. And that name gives me that feeling when all we have are words.
Yeah.
A lot of time has passed. We've been daddy and baby girl for the majority of our relationship now. I mean, I can't really imagine being anything else. What does it mean to you to be a daddy now that you know the reality and we've lived this life?
Well, now knowing what I know and being where we're at in our relationship and it having grown and evolved into what it is, and it's still growing and evolving.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's a lot of responsibility. In being a daddy, you walk a fine line between being firm, and indulging the little baby girl when she comes out. Mm-hmm.
My favorite part's being indulged, in case anybody wondered.
Gee, go figure. And yeah, but what takes time and all that, and you have to give it some patience and really getting to know one another on a very deep level. You have to know when you need to be firm and to push, and when it's okay to, ease up a little and be indulgent.
And indulge your baby girl so she's happy and she coos, but whatever. It's just my favorite part.
Yeah. And what's it like for you being baby girl?
Well, I get asked this a lot, and I always say it's my most vulnerable self. I mean, it's the part of me that giggles and flounces around and says silly stuff. But it's also the side that cries and pouts and stomps her feet. The stuff you can't let your kids see and you would never show your boss, like that in-between vulnerable stuff. And I have what I call little tendencies. I don't identify with a specific age, but I have moments that are very stereotypically little. My love of Disney movies, my need to be surrounded by the color purple.
Yes.
I love the color purple. My pigtails, knee socks, and teddy bears. The squeal of delight when I see something I love, whatever it is. Of course, I've also learned over time that my baby girl self is slightly different than my submissive self. I mean, there was a time I said I'm a submissive baby girl. It was one and the same, and I'm wrong on that. As a submissive, I want to serve you, take care of your needs, domestic and sexual, and submit to your every whim. And it can be so good when you submit to their every whim. But as a baby girl, I want to be taken care of. I want to be indulged and petted and snuggled. Most of the time, both of those sides live in harmony, and I can be your submissive baby girl. But then there have been times pretty recently when I didn't want to serve because it got in the way of my need to be taken care of. Having a bad day, having PMS, having cramps. I didn't want to get on my knees, and I didn't want to make coffee, and I didn't want to do that stuff. What I wanted was to get cuddled, and it doesn't work that way, y'all. I mean, it was a strange moment for sure. And it was a real test of our dynamic. I had to put aside my baby girl self and simply be a good submissive. Of course, I'd like to think I passed that test with flying colors, but really what I did was I learned a lesson. I mean, it's one I've preached a lot, but I had not experienced it truly until recently. The choice to submit, and it is absolutely a choice. So how do I put this? What for you, now that you sort of know and you've lived it and you've been in it, what are the core differences of what we are now, daddy and baby girl, versus what we were in the beginning?
Well, there's still hints of what we were in the beginning.
I agree.
There's still that DS aspect, and as we've learned, you don't have to pigeonhole yourself into being one thing or another. I mean, we have several layers.
That's true.
To us.
We're layered people. We're like onions, y'all.
Yep. You peel back one layer and you find another, and you just keep going. But we our daddy baby girl side is something that is prevalent a lot in our day to day. There's also our sadist masochist side, and there is still also the DS aspect of it. I agree. So that kind of comes down to the fact that a dominant gives their submissive structure through their power exchange. All right, and that's pretty much the core of any relationship in this lifestyle. the daddy-baby girl dynamic is very similar. It just takes it to another level where it puts the dominant in more of a caregiver role. Okay, brings that more to the forefront of the relationship.
Well, there you have it, y'all. We're a daddy and baby girl. Yep. We're not into kids.
Nope.
The dynamic isn't creepy or weird. We're just two people who have found the best way to express our needs. And being a daddy, a mommy, a baby girl, a little, or whatever, isn't about having sex with children. It's a legitimate dynamic in the BDSM lifestyle. You don't have to use the labels we use to have a similar dynamic either, but you should always do what feels right to you. I mean, that's first and foremost in this. Everybody needs to be consenting adults.
Absolutely.
But then do what feels right for your relationship. Okay, y'all, that's it for us this week. Feel free to reach out if you have questions or if you'd like us to touch on a specific topic in a later episode. Links are in the show notes. Okay, y'all, keep it kinky, and we'll see you next week.